We think of the devil as fire and brimstone, but what if he wears a human face? What if he speaks with calm eyes and a soft voice? Charles Manson didn't look like evil. He looked like a man who had seen too much and understood too little. He was not born a monster. He was shaped by forces older than time itself. The shadow we deny, the archetypes we ignore, and the myths that still control us today. If you want to understand what really drove Manson and why his darkness lives inside all of us, hit subscribe, give this video a like, comment, and share it. What you're about to see could change how you see yourself and everyone around you. In Jungian psychology, the devil is not just a figure of evil. He is an archetype, one of the primal patterns buried in the collective unconscious. A force that represents everything we fear, deny, and project onto others. And when someone becomes possessed by this archetype, not metaphorically but psychologically, they can become something terrifyingly real. Charles Manson was such a man. Not because he was possessed by Satan, but because he was consumed by the shadow. That hidden part of the psyche where repressed desires, fears, and instincts live. Jung warned that those who refuse to confront their shadow often become its slaves. They act out what they cannot accept within themselves. And Manson lived that truth. Born into chaos, raised in prison cells and foster homes, Manson learned early that love was conditional, trust was dangerous, and power came only through control. He wasn't just broken, he was shaped by a world that gave him no identity, so he created one himself. A persona built on charisma, manipulation, and myth. To his followers, he was more than a man. He was a prophet, a teacher, a savior. He spoke in riddles. He played music. He claimed to hear the voice of God, or at least a version of it twisted by his own fractured mind. But beneath the surface, Manson was ruled by forces far beyond his awareness. He believed in Helter Skelter, a vision of apocalyptic race war drawn from the Beatles' White album. It was madness, but it was also mythology. A story that gave meaning to chaos, a narrative that justified violence, and for his followers, it made perfect sense. Jung called this phenomenon projection. When we fail to integrate our inner contents, especially the dark ones, we place them onto others. Manson saw a world on the edge of collapse. He saw corruption everywhere. And he believed he was chosen to bring the end, not as a criminal, but as a visionary. His followers didn't see a killer. They saw a leader, someone who finally spoke their language, someone who promised them a role in something bigger than themselves. And in doing so, Manson became more than a man. He became a symbol. The devil archetype doesn't always wear horns. Sometimes he wears a smile. He plays guitar. He whispers in your ear that the world is wrong and that only you can fix it. And once you believe that, there's no turning back. Charles Manson didn't just create a cult. He became one. Not because he was evil in the traditional sense, but because he had never been given the tools to become whole. Jung believed that true psychological health comes from individuation, the process of integrating the conscious and unconscious parts of the self. But Manson never had the chance. From birth, he was fractured, abandoned by his mother, rejected by society, locked away as a child, only to emerge with no identity except what he could steal from others. And so he built himself from pieces. A patchwork soul. He borrowed ideas like clothes from religion, music, philosophy, and mythology, and wore them until they fit, until he believed them, until they became him. That's the danger of an inflated persona. When you don't know who you are, you take on roles to fill the void. Manson wasn't just a man. He was a prophet, a messiah, a revolutionary, and once he believed that, there was no room left for doubt. To Jung, this kind of inflation is not just dangerous, it's possession. The archetype takes over. The man becomes the role. And when that role demands violence, destruction, or transformation, he follows without question. Manson spoke often of Helter Skelter, not just as a prophecy, but as a mission. He believed the Beatles' song of the same name contained secret messages, that it foretold a coming race war, that black people would rise up, overthrow white society, and then retreat into hiding, leaving Manson and his followers to rule the new world. It sounds absurd, but absurdity doesn't matter when belief takes hold, because belief isn't about logic, it's about meaning. And Manson gave his followers something the world had denied them: purpose. They weren't just lost souls anymore. They were chosen. They were warriors. They were part of something bigger than themselves. And when someone gives you that, when they make you feel seen, understood, and powerful, it's almost impossible to walk away. This is the power of archetypes. They don't ask for your approval. They demand your participation. And once you step into the story, you become part of its unfolding. Jung warned that when the collective unconscious is disturbed, when society loses its myths, its moral compass, its spiritual grounding, archetypal forces erupt into consciousness, sometimes through artists, sometimes through prophets, and sometimes through men like Manson. He didn't just believe in Helter Skelter, he lived it, he performed it, he made it real. And those who followed him didn't see madness, they saw destiny. But beneath the myth lay something darker, something Manson never faced: his shadow. Jung taught that the shadow contains everything we reject about ourselves: our rage, our fear, our desires. And when we refuse to integrate it, when we deny it instead of confronting it, it grows monstrous. It begins to act through us. Manson never confronted his shadow. Instead, he projected it onto the world. He saw corruption everywhere, in government, in media, in the rich, in the powerful. And in doing so, he justified his own descent into chaos. He claimed to be fighting a system, but he was really fighting himself. And in the end, the only way to silence the darkness inside him was to bring it out into the open. Through murder. Through ritual. Through sacrifice. The Tate LaBianca killings were not random acts of violence. They were symbolic. They were a performance. A final act in a play written long before Manson ever picked up a knife. To understand Manson, we must stop seeing him as a monster and start seeing him as a mirror, a reflection of the forces that live within all of us. The need for meaning, the hunger for belonging, the seduction of ideology, and the terrifying ease with which we can lose ourselves in a story. In the next chapter, we will go even deeper into the heart of Manson's mind, into the rituals of death, and into the dark. Truth that none of us are immune to the devil who walks among us. What happens when someone believes they are chosen, not by accident, but by destiny? Charles Manson didn't just believe he was special. He believed he was meant to bring the end of the world, that he had been given a message, from music, from dreams, from voices only he could hear, and in that belief, he found purpose, power, and permission. Jung spoke often about how archetypes can possess individuals, not metaphorically, psychologically. When someone loses touch with their personal identity and becomes consumed by a mythic role, they stop acting freely. They become instruments of something far older and deeper than themselves. And Manson was no exception. To his followers, he was not a criminal. He was a prophet, a revolutionary, a man who saw beyond the veil of normalcy and into the hidden truth of the world. And in many ways, he was right. He did see through the illusions of society. He saw its hypocrisy, its emptiness, its lies. But instead of using that insight to heal, he used it to destroy. This is the paradox of the trickster archetype, a figure Jung often associated with the devil himself. The trickster reveals truths, but through deception. He tears down systems, only to replace them with chaos. He speaks wisdom, while leading others astray. Manson became the ultimate expression of this archetype. He exposed the cracks in American culture, the obsession with fame, the emptiness of consumerism, the breakdown of moral foundations, and then twisted that awareness into justification for violence. His followers didn't see a madman. They saw someone who finally made sense of a world that had stopped making sense. They were lost souls, runaways, dropouts, broken hearts searching for meaning. And Manson gave them what they needed most: belonging, direction, a story to live by. But stories have power, and once you step into one, it begins to shape you as much as you shape it. Manson's story demanded sacrifice. It required blood. And so, on August 9th, 1969, that story reached its climax. The murders at Sharon Tate's house were not random. They were symbolic. A ritualistic performance of everything Manson despised: wealth without responsibility, fame without substance, life without meaning. And in destroying those lives, he believed he was fulfilling prophecy. But here's the terrifying truth. None of his followers hesitated. They didn't question him. They didn't rebel. They simply obeyed. Because by then, Manson wasn't just a man. He was an idea, a force, a living myth. Jung warned that when people lose connection to their individual selves, they fall into the grip of the collective unconscious. They become part of a group psyche that moves like a single organism, driven by instinct, not reason, by faith, not logic. And once that shift happens, there is no stopping the momentum. Manson didn't need weapons to control his followers. He needed belief. And once belief takes root, it becomes more powerful than fear, more binding than chains. After Tate came La Bianca, another home, another slaughter. But now, the pattern was clear. This wasn't just murder, it was theater, a final act in a play written in the depths of the unconscious mind. And yet, even after the bodies were found, even after the police came knocking, Manson didn't run. He smiled, he laughed, as if he had already won. Because to him the war had begun. Helter Skelter was real, the revolution was coming, and he was ready. But the world didn't rise up. There was no race war, no uprising. Just silence. And then handcuffs. In the next chapter, we will go even deeper, into the heart of what Manson represented. We'll explore the shadow not just in one man, but in all of us. And we'll ask the question no one wants to face. If given the right circumstances, could any of us become him? What if the devil isn't a being, but a pattern? A force that repeats itself across time, wearing different faces, speaking different languages, but always with the same purpose: to test us, to reveal what we refuse to see in ourselves. Charles Manson was not born evil. He was born empty, abandoned by his mother, rejected by society, locked away before he even understood who he was. And from that void, something took root. Not madness, but myth. An ancient story, reborn in a broken man. Jung believed that the devil archetype is not about literal evil, but about the parts of ourselves we fear most. Our rage, our hunger for power, our need to belong, no matter the cost. And when those forces are denied instead of confronted, they erupt into consciousness through figures like Manson, men and women who become vessels for the shadow of an entire culture. Manson didn't just reflect his own darkness, he reflected ours. He exposed the cracks in American identity, the illusion of freedom without responsibility, of individualism without self-awareness, of rebellion without meaning. And in doing so, he became a mirror none of us wanted to look into. But the real horror is not Manson himself. It's how easily others followed him, how quickly belief can replace truth, how fast devotion can turn into obedience. Because it wasn't just Manson who committed those crimes. It was the people who listened, who obeyed, who believed. And that should terrify us. Because it means the same potential lives inside all of us. The need for certainty, the desire to be chosen, the longing to belong, even to something monstrous. Jung warned that when the collective unconscious is disturbed, archetypes rise uninvited. They take form in politics, in religion, in art, and sometimes in killers. Today, we think we're immune, that cults are relics of the past. that we would never fall for such manipulation. But the trickster has only changed masks. He speaks now in headlines, in algorithms, in movements that promise salvation at the cost of dissent. And the danger remains the same. When we stop questioning, we stop seeing. And when we stop seeing, we become part of the story, whether we realize it or not. So what does this mean for us today? It means we must face our shadows, not deny them, not project them onto others, but bring them into awareness. Because only then can we begin the process of individuation, the integration of the self. Only then can we break free from the myths that control us. Manson died in prison. His name faded from headlines. But his legacy lives on, not just in true crime documentaries or biographies, but in every person who searches for meaning and finds it in something dangerous, something absolute. The devil never looks like you expect. Sometimes he wears a smile, sometimes he plays guitar, and sometimes he tells you the world is wrong, and only you can fix it. If you've made it this far, thank you. If this video stirred something in you, a question, a doubt, a realization, please share it. Hit subscribe, leave a comment, tell me what you saw in the mirror. Because the greatest trick the devil ever pulled was convincing us he wasn't real.